Mercedes is not under pressure because Russell and Antonelli touched. Mercedes is under pressure because that clash exposed the one thing a dominant team is never supposed to lose: control. Before Monaco, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile pressure has turned one teammate fight into a much bigger question. Was Canada just hard racing, or was it the first public sign that Mercedes' championship machine is cracking from the inside? George Russell left Canada saying he had nothing to lose. Kimi Antonelli left Canada with a 43-point lead. The radios exploded. A private team meeting was exposed. Toto Wolff warned that teammates may not always have total freedom to fight. And now, on the narrowest, most dangerous streets of the season, Mercedes has to decide something it does not want to say out loud. Do they still let Russell fight? Or do they protect Antonelli before one corner destroys everything? Because in Monaco, there is no room for pride, no room for hesitation, and no room for two Mercedes drivers who both believe the front of the race belongs to them. And if Russell attacks like a man with nothing to lose, the Real investigation may not be about the clash in Canada. It may be about how Mercedes allowed its own title fight to become a war. Subscribe to the channel. At first, Mercedes wanted everyone to believe this was just a racing incident. A hard move. A heated radio. A young driver frustrated in the moment. An experienced driver defending his position. Nothing more. That is the version every dominant team wants when tension appears between teammates. Keep it small. Keep it technical. Keep it inside the language of racing. But the problem for Mercedes is that Canada did not feel small. It felt like the result of something that had been building for weeks. Because when Antonelli shouted over the radio, he was not only reacting to one corner. He sounded like a driver who believed a line had already been drawn, and that Russell had stepped over it. That is why his most important words were not about the contact. They were about the relationship. He said Russell was his teammate. That word changed everything. Because a teammate is not supposed to race you like a stranger. A teammate knows the risks. A teammate knows that one crash can cost the entire team. A teammate understands that the car beside him is not just another rival, it is the other half of the same championship machine. And when Antonelli said it that way, the message was clear. This was not just about being pushed wide. This was about trust. But here is where the pressure becomes even more serious. After the sprint clash, Antonelli made a comment about not understanding the meeting. That one sentence exposed something Mercedes never wanted to become part of the public story. There had already been a meeting. That means Mercedes had already seen enough tension before Canada to speak with both drivers about how they were expected to fight. So the clash was not a surprise born from nowhere. It was a test. And in the eyes of Antonelli, Russell had failed it. That is why the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile pressure around this situation matters so much before Monaco. The original move may not have been investigated at the time, and Russell used that fact to defend himself. But Formula One does not only react to isolated moments. It watches patterns. And the pattern around Mercedes is getting harder to ignore. Australia looked perfect, but the data already whispered that Antonelli was not going to behave like a normal rookie. China put Antonelli ahead in the championship, while Russell suffered a qualifying problem at exactly the wrong moment. Japan gave Antonelli another major advantage through the timing of the safety car, while Russell was left feeling as if the race itself had turned against him. Miami showed something even more uncomfortable, that the W17 seemed to fit Antonelli's driving style more naturally, especially when it came to protecting the rear tires under pressure. And then Canada took every quiet doubt and turned it into noise. That is the danger. One incident can be explained. 5 races of tension become evidence. Mercedes can say the drivers are free to race. Mercedes can say the team is calm. Mercedes can say there is no internal war. But the radio, the press conference, the championship gap, and Wolff's own warning all point toward the same truth. This is no longer just competition. This is a control problem. George Russell entered the season expecting to be the main protagonist. He had the experience. He had the status. He had the belief that this was finally his championship moment. And for one weekend in Australia, that belief looked safe. He won. Antonelli followed. Mercedes celebrated. The order looked correct. But Formula One has a cruel way of taking a story that seems settled and destroying it with lap time. Because Antonelli was already fast enough to make the team look twice. Not later in the season. Not after months of learning. Immediately. That is what made the first internal comparison so dangerous. It did not scream. It whispered. But sometimes the quietest data is the most damaging, because it cannot be argued with. A driver can dismiss a journalist. A team can dismiss a rumor. But it cannot dismiss its own timing screens. Then China made the private concern public. Antonelli did not just get close to Russell. He beat him. He used the strategy, took the position, and finished the job. That victory changed his role inside Mercedes. Before China, he was the exciting young talent. After China, he was a championship threat. And not a threat to Ferrari. Not a threat to McLaren. Not a threat to Red Bull. A threat to George Russell. From that point on, every Mercedes weekend carried two races. The visible race against the field. And the hidden race inside the garage. Russell still had speed. That was never the question. But the season kept hurting him in ways that made the frustration more personal. The qualifying problem in China arrived when he needed the cleanest possible session. The safety car in Japan arrived when the timing favored Antonelli. Miami revealed that the car's balance and tire behavior may have been easier for Antonelli to live with. And when a driver keeps losing ground through a mix of performance, timing, and mechanical trouble, he does not experience those moments separately. He carries them. Every lost chance becomes part of the next one. Every unanswered question makes the next disappointment feel heavier. That is exactly why Canada exploded. By the time Russell and Antonelli reached turn 1 in the sprint, they were not just two cars fighting for track position. They were two versions of the Mercedes future fighting for authority. Russell was defending more than a corner. He was defending his status. Antonelli was attacking more than a position. He was attacking the idea that he should still behave like the younger driver in Russell's team. And Mercedes, caught between them, had the worst possible problem. Both drivers had a point. Russell could argue that he had raced hard, and that the stewards did not investigate the move. In racing terms, that mattered. Antonelli could argue that there had already been an internal discussion, and that teammates should not force each other into that kind of situation. In team terms, that mattered too. That is the impossible part. Sometimes a move can be legal and still be poisonous. Sometimes a defense can survive the rule book and still damage the garage. Sometimes no penalty is given, but trust still disappears. And that is exactly the kind of gray area that destroys teammate relationships. Because once both drivers believe they are right, the team principal becomes the judge. Toto Wolff tried to cool the fire. He told Antonelli to focus on driving, not complaining. He warned both drivers that the team needed clean competition without extra risk. But even that warning revealed the fear. Mercedes knew this could get worse. And Monaco is the place where worse becomes catastrophic. On a normal circuit, drivers have space to survive pride. They can run wide. They can recover. They can fight again on the next straight. Monaco does not work like that. At Monaco, pride meets concrete. A late move does not just cost time. It can end the race. A squeezed teammate does not just lose momentum. He can hit the wall. A small misunderstanding does not just become a radio argument. It can become two broken Mercedes cars blocking the circuit while every rival team quietly celebrates. That is why the first block of this story is not really about Canada. It is about what Canada revealed before Monaco. Mercedes is not facing a normal teammate rivalry anymore. It is facing a test of authority. Can Wolff still tell Russell where the line is? Can Antonelli trust Russell to respect it? Can the team protect its championship leader without making the other side of the garage feel betrayed? And most importantly, can Mercedes survive the moment when the fastest way to win the title may require limiting one of its own drivers? That is the question hanging over the team now. Because Russell's final message after Canada was not just frustration. It was a warning sign. He said he had nothing to lose. For a fan, that sounds exciting. For Mercedes, it should sound terrifying. A driver with nothing to lose does not think like a points leader. He does not calculate every risk the same way. He does not drive with the same fear of damaging a championship that he already believes belongs to someone else. He becomes lighter, sharper, more unpredictable. And when that driver is sitting in one of the fastest cars in Formula 1, heading into the tightest circuit of the season, the entire team has a problem. Because Antonelli is not just another rookie anymore. He is the championship leader. He has the momentum. He has the wins. And after Canada, he has a 43-point advantage over Russell. That number changes the atmosphere. Mercedes can talk about equality. Mercedes can talk about freedom. Mercedes can talk about letting both drivers race. But a 43-point gap creates pressure that no team can ignore. At some point, championship logic begins to overpower emotional fairness. And if that point arrives in Monaco, the whole world will see it. Not through an announcement. Not through a press release. Through one radio message. Through one strategy call. Through one instruction that tells us who Mercedes really believes in. That is why the clash before Monaco feels bigger than a clash. It is the first visible crack in a much deeper question. Is Mercedes still managing two equal drivers? Or is it quietly preparing to protect one championship leader from the teammate who refuses to step aside? The second layer of the Mercedes crisis is not the clash itself. It is what happened after the clash. Because in Formula One, the first incident is rarely the real danger. The real danger begins when the people involved start explaining it. That is when the clean racing story breaks apart, and the deeper emotions begin to leak through. Russell did not sound like a driver who believed he had crossed a line. Antonelli did not sound like a driver willing to accept it as normal racing. And Mercedes did not sound like a team fully in control of either of them. That is why Canada became so explosive. The sprint clash created the spark, but the press conference, the radio messages, and the Sunday race poured fuel onto it. After the sprint, Russell leaned on one simple argument. The stewards did not investigate the move. To him, that was enough. No investigation meant no obvious breach. No penalty meant no official wrongdoing. In Russell's mind, the matter was clear. He had raced hard. He had stayed within the limits. He had done what elite drivers do when they are fighting for position. But Antonelli saw something different. He did not frame it only through the rule book. He framed it through the relationship. That is why his reference to the internal meeting mattered so much. Because Antonelli was not simply saying, Russell broke a racing rule. He was saying, Russell broke an understanding. And that is much more dangerous. A racing rule can be debated by stewards. An understanding can only survive if both drivers still respect it. Once that trust breaks, the rule book becomes too small for the problem. Because Formula One has always had two sets of rules. The official rules, written by the governing body. And the teammate rules, written quietly inside the garage. The official rules decide penalties. The teammate rules decide whether a garage survives a championship fight. And Canada showed that Mercedes' teammate rules are under pressure. Toto Wolff knew it. That is why his reaction was so carefully balanced. He could not openly blame Russell, because Russell had not been investigated. He could not openly validate Antonelli's anger too strongly, because that would make the championship leader look protected. And he could not dismiss the whole thing, because the radios had made it clear that the problem was real. So Wolff walked the narrowest line possible. He reminded everyone that elite drivers defend hard. He pointed toward the kind of move a driver like Max Verstappen might make, suggesting that leaving the door open is not always what top drivers do. That protected Russell. But then Wolff also admitted that Mercedes needed to ask a deeper question. How should these two race each other from now on? As if they are fighting a third car? Or as if they are fighting a teammate? That question is the heart of the entire story. Because there is no easy answer. If Russell and Antonelli race each other like strangers, Mercedes risks losing both cars, especially at Monaco. If they race each other like teammates, someone has to compromise. And if someone has to compromise, the next question becomes unbearable. Who? The experienced driver who expected to lead the season? Or the 19-year-old championship leader with a 43-point advantage? This is where the situation becomes political. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a conspiracy way. In the quiet, brutal way Formula One teams actually operate. A championship does not need a public number one driver to become a number one campaign. Sometimes it happens through tiny choices. Who gets the first strategy call? Who gets the safer pit window? Who gets protected from traffic? Who gets told to manage tires? Who gets told not to fight too hard? Who gets reminded that the team result matters more than one personal battle? That is how a hierarchy is built. Not through one announcement. Through repeated decisions that all lean the same way. And before Monaco, Russell has every reason to watch those decisions closely. Because his season has already taught him to be suspicious of momentum. In China, the mechanical problem hurt him at a critical point. In Japan, the safety car timing worked against him and helped Antonelli. In Miami, the W17 seemed to suit Antonelli's tire management more naturally. In Canada, Russell was leading when the car suffered an inverter problem and shut down.